Hello, this is Signals from the Hill, a podcast about comics from Avery Hill Publishing. I'm Ricky Miller, co-publisher at Avery Hill, and this is my first time presenting the podcast, so please cut me some slack in the reviews. Um, in this episode, we've got an interview with the brilliant cartoonist Nicole Goux as we celebrate the release of her new book, Pet Peeves. Nicole is an Eisner Award-nominated illustrator and cartoonist from LA. She's the artist of DC's Shadow of the Batgirl and co-creator of Forest Hills Bootleg Society with Dave Baker, amongst many other works that they've done together. She's been published by DC, Dark Horse, IDW, and Oni, and most recently by us. Firstly, though, here's what's going on in the world of Avery Hill at the moment. The aforementioned Pet Peeves came out this week. You can pick it up from all good bookstores and from our online store right now. If you go to our website, www.averyhillpublishing.com, there's links to our store and you can sign up to our newsletter where we do lots of special offers and give away free comics sometimes. And yeah, you should do that now. We've also had our next two books back from the printer and they look fantastic. Big Ugly by Elise Weaver is out next month, and then the Macbeth adaptation by Kay Briggs comes out in July. We've also got a few dates for your diary. If you're in the LA area, Nicole is having a launch party for Pet Peeves at Golden Apple Comics on the 31st of March. If you're in London, then come to Elise Weaver's launch at Jam Bookstore in Dalston on June the 22nd. And also in London is the South London Comics and Zine Fair on 16th of July at Stanley Halls. As well as having a table there, we're going to be curating the panel discussions that will be happening throughout the day. And we've got some brilliant comics guests lined up and lots of other fun stuff going on. So please do check that out if you're in the area. It's going to be a good day. A couple of Avery Hill alumni have been nominated for Eisners this year. Zoe Thorogood is actually the most nominated creator with 5 nominations for her books It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth and Rain. I haven't read Rain yet, going to get to it, but It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth is an astonishing piece of work. It's truly, truly great, I think. We published The Impending Blindness of Billy Scott by Zoe a couple of years ago, which you should all check out. And she's also doing a bunch of shows at the moment, so check out listings to see if she's coming to somewhere near you. And Tilly Walden was nominated for her Walking Dead book, Clementine, which is also fantastic, as you might expect from Tilly. She's recently also been named Vermont's Comic Laureate, so she's still going up and up in the world. That's all the news. Now here's that interview with Nicole. Hi, Nicole. How are you doing?
Doing all right. How's it going?
Yeah, good, good. It's been yeah, it's kind of late spring here and raining a lot. Where are you at the moment?
Back in LA, it was very rainy when I was in London last month, but now it's starting to feel like summer already.
Um, yeah, I wanted to ask you about your neighborhood actually, because you grew up in LA, didn't you? So can you tell us a bit about the part of LA that you live in?
So now I live in Koreatown, which is the Korean neighborhood kind of in central LA, and it's really great. There's a ton of good shops, lots of good food, very walkable. I live in a little apartment because LA has gotten very expensive. But I actually grew up outside of the city in the suburbs,
Okay,
which is a pretty different experience. I wasn't in LA Central until post college, I guess.
cool. Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs as well. I feel like all the suburbs around every major city are basically the same. They're kind of yeah,
Yeah,
they're kind of boring, but they tend to provoke artists and inspire people because I feel like if you live near a big city but not in it, you're kind of always like looking for something
mm,
else. But,
yeah. LA was about 30, 40 minutes from where we lived. I mean, I lived in two different places. One right over the hill, which is in the valley, literally. I am a valley girl. Um, and then when I was 8, we moved. And so I spent most of my teenage years kind of 40 minutes to an hour from the city. And I got to live in a place that was really safe and really pretty and had lots of hiking and was nice, but you had access to the museums and the culture of LA. I went to a lot of concerts as a kid, which was nice.
Cool. What kind of kids were you? What kind of childhood did you have? Were you like sporty, or were you drawing in your room, or were you in the mall? I was seeing Clueless,
Yeah.
so I know everything about LA.
Yeah, that's exactly what LA is like. I was 100% an indoor kid. I did a bunch of sports mostly because my parents made me, but I had a problem with sticking with it. So I think the longest I ever did a sport was 4 years, but not with any kind of dedication. Um, I was definitely I'm going to print this anime character off and then copy it and just sit in my room and draw kind of kid.
So you used to draw a lot. But like, when did you first realize that you were good at drawing? Did someone tell you, or did you just kind of know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I assume it's this way for a lot of artists, but there's sort of a chicken and the egg scenario where I think we're so focused on this idea of people being talented and having natural talent. But the only way that I mean, I guess there are some proclivities, but the only way that you really develop that is by sitting there and doing it. So my parents put me in, after school art classes, not even after school, before school art classes when
Wow.
I was like 2, because my mom used to take painting classes from this woman who taught from a back house of her friend. And so she also had kids classes and she would take us to those. So I started drawing really, really young, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement starting really early. And when I started going to school, I was always the art kid, from a really young age. And so I may have had some natural tendencies toward it, but I'm definitely a gold star kid where give me a gold star, tell me I'm good at something, I'm going to be excited about doing it because I like that feeling. So I just kind of, have been doing it and practicing it as much as I can as a kid, or since I was a kid. And fortunately, I enjoy it as well as enjoying the praise.
Which other subjects were you good at?
um, Nothing in particular, but I was kind of your standard gifted kid where I was kind of the way that I learn tends to be I pick things up pretty quickly. I'm pretty good at learning. I have skills in learning versus skills at like any particular thing. But I tend to cap out at a certain point. So I'm like I played music as a kid. I played piano and flute, and in the early stages of that, it's like, oh, you're learning quickly, you're doing good, and then I don't know whether I just get bored or don't want to practice anymore. But I kind of cap out on my interest level in a lot of things. So I was really good at school. I got straight A's all the time, but there wasn't anything in particular other than art. It just kind of has always been art for me. That's the one place that I really found joy in school. But I like other things. I like taking language classes. I like English, but nothing ever kind of scratched that itch as much as art classes.
Sure. Were there any particular characters you like drawing as a kid, or artists that you would copy or try to emulate?
Well, when I was really starting to draw comic stuff, like, as a little girl, I drew horses like every little girl and drew, little characters and stuff. But when I really started getting into manga and diving in really hard on that stuff, there was anything that I was watching or reading, I would basically just look up images online, print them out, and then copy them. But in particular, there's an artist named Yuwatase who does, she's done a bunch of different shoujo comics. And then this is a little embarrassing now that we know what we know about him, but the Rurouni Kenshin, the guy who did that, I would always print out those characters and draw them. But it was really, I had a very kind of eclectic taste in manga as a kid, and so whatever was the like book of the week, that was what I was drawing.
Did you enjoy comics because of the art, because you like to kind of draw as well, or did you find something? Is there something else about comics that drew you to them? Was
I mean, I
anyone in
think
your family reading them, or
my brother read American comics, superhero comics. I didn't connect with that at all as a kid. I read every day when I came home from school. I would read newspaper strips, um, everything from Zips to, I didn't really read Calvin and Hobbes actually, but you know, non sequitur, all these like sometimes too highbrow for my, little kid mind. I read a lot of Garfield, that kind of stuff. Um, but when I didn't so much connect with the art in that as with the storytelling and the, jokes. And then it wasn't until I started reading manga that it definitely was into the art, but also, I liked the stories that they were telling. And a lot of the stuff that I read was slice of life dramas that felt more relatable to me. And so that I think translated pretty directly into what I make now.
sure? What was the first comic you can actually remember drawing? Did you just kind of draw cartoon little strips, or did you suddenly decide, like a lot of people, I'm going to do a 9-book series at the age of 10?
Absolutely not. Yeah, actually, I didn't make comics at all as a kid. I drew characters over and over and over and over again. But I didn't really have storytelling is not something that comes naturally to me. So I didn't have so much the stories, and I didn't really know that I could tell the type of stories that I do, I guess, even though I was seeing in the manga. I'm not really sure why. um, but so I had a couple non-starters with, I had a friend who we were starting to write a book together, or she was writing and I was going to draw. My brother was going to write something because he was a writer as a kid and then actually was a creative writing major in college as well. And they just kind of, the people that I tried to pair myself with, look, comics are a lot of work and those things just never happened, which is, I think, really, really common. And I didn't have the confidence to write stories on my own at the time. So I just drew characters. And then I kind of fell out of love with comics for a while in like mid high school and decided to focus on, I went to school for drawing and painting and then switched to illustration. So I was planning on doing more editorial work and actually anything else that people would hire me for where I could draw, because what I really cared about was making the art and getting to draw things. And it wasn't until after college that I, started going to Zine Fest and realizing that my idea of what comics had been, which was newspaper strips, manga, or American superhero comics, was just a teeny tiny slice of the pie, and that people were making all kinds of comics in all kinds of styles, and that I didn't have to fit into one of those molds in order to make books. And that's when I really started, working with Dave and finding someone to make stories with, and then eventually, starting small and making mini comics and writing stuff on my own.
So what was the first comic you actually made then?
The
Can you
first
remember?
comic, well, I made one in college, which was like a 1-page dream sequence comic for an assignment, which is just about a girl, waking up from a dream, walking into her kitchen to find an entire tree grown in her kitchen, climbing up the tree, falling, and waking up in her bed. That's it. That's the only thing I did. And then when I started making stuff with Dave, we did a mini, like an 8-page mini for his book Action Hospital called DeLorean Gray Mermaid Hunter. a like bounty hunter goes on a like revenge mission to get back his lover from these mermaids who have captured him. And then the next thing we made was mini comics, like road trip mini comics, and that really felt like something that I was excited about making, and it was a story that I could kind of wrap my brain around and add to, and we kind of wrote that together. So, and then we printed them out, and I think we Kinko's Xerox them, printed them out, and started taking them to shows and being able to take those comics and sell them and have people enjoy them was really kind of like a big turning point for me.
And at that point, had you got back into reading comics as well? Would you just describe yourself as a comics fan at that point? Was there like
Yeah.
a moment where you kind of, I know you said you kind of drifted away and then you found the zine fair and stuff like that. So was there like a couple of titles that you picked up and was like, oh, okay, I'm into this. This is me now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I couldn't even tell you what I was picking up from Zine Fest and stuff, because a lot of
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was scenes or mini comics or really small things that I probably haven't looked at in 9 years. But at that time, I started reading things like Jillian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki. You know, I think I read Skim first, or this one summer, I can't remember what order. And that was really like, oh, this is what I want to make. Okay, I get it. Like that, Eleanor Davis. There's a couple other creators who I started getting into independent comics and slice of life comics, and I was able to kind of see where my storytelling sensibilities fit into making books.
So now, who would you say are like the comic creators that you love and follow? I mean, yeah, like
The
Gillian
same, really.
Tamaki and Eleanor
Yeah.
Davis. That's as good as it gets, really.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't changed much. They're still so influential on me.
And is
I
that
would.
the storytelling, or is that the art style, or like all of it, or
It's
the
both,
sensibility?
actually. I mean, Jillian Tamaki is just an incredible illustrator, and she does so much storytelling in the drawings, and I think really adds so much to those books. So the drawings are just incredible, but also the Mariko, particularly in Skim, her ability to kind of get inside the brain of a teenage girl, and you can feel it in the dialogue and the language of what it feels like to be a kid. And I talk a lot about this thing because as an adult, I still read manga, and I'm reading more now probably than I have in a long time. But there's a thing about particularly shonen manga, but a lot of shoujo, is that it's meant for young kids, and the storytelling is a visceral, emotional storytelling. So everything is heightened. Everything is like high stakes. There's so much drama, and a lot of adults, I understand, and now myself, can't connect with it in the same way. And Mariko's storytelling has this way of being, it feels like it feels being a kid in the way that manga can, but not in that like heightened drama. Everything is like super high stakes thing where it's just too intense for the adult mind to kind of process. The stakes are high, but they feel important in a way that isn't so like slapping you in the face with it, and the voice, Mariko's teenager voice, is just really, really great and funny. They're funny. They're both funny and emotional, and sometimes really sad and complex. I think a lot of the time when we tell stories about or for teens, adults like to dumb them down a little bit, make them feel safe. And I think there's a place for that, of course. But I also think, I think back to how I was as a teenager, and I was having, very complex adult issues and thoughts about stuff. And so I don't really understand why we assume that teenagers are not going to understand, or it's going to be too intense, or we need to protect them from these things, and I
Yeah.
think the way that they tell those stories is very feels lived in.
I think that kind of manga influence on American and UK comics at the moment is really interesting because when I used to read comics and there was a bit of it. It was like Jim Lee and people like that would bring a bit of, and Frank Miller would bring that kind of a little bit of that style into it. But now I think
Yeah.
I never really realized it because I didn't read manga, and then I started working with Tilly Walden and Zoe Farragut and people like that, and and I was kind of like, oh yeah, they're doing all this kind of really heightened emotional thing. I'm like, I don't really get it. I mean, it's great, but I don't really get it. And then I started reading manga and got deep into that, and now I'm like, oh, I come back. I
Yeah.
can understand where all these creators are coming from, and I think that fusion is just like really exciting at the moment. I think that is where
Yeah.
comics are going, and or where they are basically.
Well, I think, my generation of creators, we all grew up on manga. So
Hmm.
whether you're literally referencing manga or influenced by manga, it's kind of pervasive in our brains. And so there there are just storytelling ticks and ways of expressing things that come from that you can be reading a book that looks nothing like a manga, and it's still pulling influence from that, just because so many of us read so much of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, it's exciting. I think definitely. Um, So let's talk about Pet Peeves, your book, which is a brilliant book. Can you tell us about it? The story, the
Yeah,
start, the plot.
the plot. Yes. The plot is always a little tricky to talk about because I never want to give stuff away. But it is about a 20 something post college graduate named Bobby who is, she was a music major and she's trying to find her way after college, and she's sort of just at a standstill, stuck. She's working as a bartender at a job that she hates. She's splitting rent with her old roommate from college who is doing much better than she is, and so taking over more of the rent and more of the apartment. And so she's living in this space that doesn't feel like it's hers. It feels like it's someone else's that she's just kind of invading. Um, and she, has some failed relationships. She has a big ex who kind of, you know, the way that we feel that people destroy our lives, but may or may not have that much effect in reality. And after her ex comes into the bar one night and she goes on a crazy bender, um, she's walking home from work and finds a stray dog who follows her home, and she decides to adopt him and name him. And as we know, dogs are not always, particularly stray dogs, are not always well behaved. And so he kind of comes in as this, whirlwind of chaos in her life, which is both, she feels like this is a boon for her, this one thing that understands her and is there for her and is with her all the time, but it also is destroying her apartment and her relationships and taking over any motivation she might have had to pursue her dreams of being a musician. And that's the literal things that it's about.
And
um,
I just before we go on to what else it is about, I actually wanted to ask you about the musician side of it. Now I know that you kind of made music when you were younger. What
yeah.
what kind of music did you make, and was it like Bobby's music? And what do you imagine that Bobby's music is like?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, my dad is a studio musician. My entire life, he worked as, he's second call guitar player in LA for studio stuff. So he's worked on everything that you can think of in terms of movies and TV and often albums. My dad's probably played on it at some point. So I've just, and both my parents actually, my mom, they met in music school at UCLA. So both my parents are very musical. My mom didn't play anything as I was growing up, but they both have a love of that and wanted me to experience and learn from music. So at a really young age, they put me in piano classes, and then as I do, I lost interest, and then I wanted to do flute, and they made me do more piano again before I can do flute. And all of that was very traditional, classical learning. I played flute in band for 4 or 5 years. So, occasionally we would get to play the Lord of the Rings theme or something, but it was mostly classical. And I honestly think that's why I kind of lost interest in it. That and being in band in middle school is just a horrific experience. It's awful.
It
Not
always
my
looks
thing.
it on films. We don't really have that much of an equivalent of it. So
Honestly, if I had been in just orchestra, I probably would have been fine and stuck with it. I liked the music and I liked the camaraderie of it, but marching band is just it's a nightmare. Like, you have to wear those horrible outfits. You have to stand out in the sun playing music with someone who's screaming at you about keeping time. Like, it just is awful. There are people who love it. This is my opinion. I did not enjoy it. So I quit when I got to high school. I was like, no more. I cannot do this. And then I stopped playing music completely for a long time. And in college, I started picking up guitar, and I've always played a little bit of guitar, mostly singer-songwriter stuff. I am not at all good and not at all dedicated to learning, but I enjoy playing and singing a little bit. And, my dad was able to help me learn some stuff and learn some songs and learn to read tabs. So I play guitar and ukulele now, but not very often and not very well. And Bobby's music, I think, probably stems a lot from those interests of, I listen to a lot of folk music. When I was a kid, so I did the general pop thing as a kid. I was really into Britney Spears and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Christina Aguilera.
just the good
And then
stuff.
oh yeah, which now I made fun of myself for a long time for liking those things, and now I listen to them. I'm like, you know what? Pop music is great.
Yep,
There's a reason
they
people like
age
it.
well.
And then there was a time period where I just listened to whatever my brother was listening to, which was a lot of rock, a lot of punk, a lot of screamo for a while, which I didn't even enjoy, but I listened to it anyway. And then the movie Garden State came out. That changed my life.
Right.
That soundtrack,
Is it the
I have
Shins? Yeah, the Shins and
the
that kind of
Shins.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have had a Shins album in the 5 CD changer in my car since I got my car in 2007.
Wow.
Shins was I don't know if I would still say they're my favorite band, but they were my favorite band forever. And that's when I started kind of discovering my own musical tastes, and I got really into indie folk, and that's kind of shifted to indie folk, bedroom pop, electronic, whatever it is. And so I imagine Bobby having a combination of those influences, folky, indie, possibly a little electronic,
And I
and mostly
understand.
sad.
Sorry.
Sad. Most of the music I listen to is pretty sad.
And I understand you now want to play us a few songs of your own. And,
Oh God.
do you write
It's
songs?
funny.
Or?
I have written a couple very bad songs, but I couldn't tell you what they are or where they are. That was in college, but I did used to record myself playing on my my laptop camera so that I could hear how I sounded. So I actually have a bunch of recordings of myself. And I had uploaded them onto a private album on Facebook so I could share them with a friend. And so now my memories on Facebook, because I don't upload anything to Facebook anymore, but so many of my memories that pop up at the top of your feed, they're almost always those videos. And I'm like, I'm not good, and it's very embarrassing. Every once in a while, I'll listen to one and just go, "Oh man, that's not that's not great."
We'll add those to the end of this podcast, and that can be the
Right?
outro.
Yeah. I'll put a link to the album. No, never. No one will ever hear those.
So yeah, we should go back to pet peeves. I was kind of more interested
Mhm.
in the music side of stuff. We should have chatted about music when you're over because I like all that stuff as well. But
Yeah.
so uh, yeah, I mean, we were going to discuss the themes. So do you want to tell us a bit about what it's actually about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, there are, can't pick a single theme really to say what it's about. Almost all of the work that I make is about making things in some way, and um, Bobby's story is essentially about the struggle to make things and what we what sort of roadblocks we place in front of ourselves when we are not confident in what we're doing and what we're trying to make, and um, that is kind of at the core of her story. And she is someone who has big dreams, has these kind of lofty goals. But, you know, when I got out of college, I had the skill. I had been drawing since I was a little kid. I knew how to make art, but I didn't know how to do anything else. You know, I got out, you know, they don't, at least my school, I think most art schools, public art schools anyway, um, they don't give you the tools for writing an invoice or marketing yourself or pursuing work, you know, how to be a freelancer. And so you get out and you just kind of look around being like, well, what now? What am I supposed to do? I can't just make art because I will be poor. So you get a job doing something else. And, you know, the real answer is you build a portfolio and you learn all these skills to market yourself. And now there's social media. You know, at the time that was not barely beginning, because I guess Facebook started my senior year of high school, I think. So flash forward 5 years later, it's still pretty young, and not at all what it is today. We didn't have TikTok. We did have Instagram, maybe, but it wasn't what it is now. Though now it's all of those things are changing rapidly and going away, and navigating that is super hard. That's kind of besides the point. But so it is about whatever it is that you want to do, you know, what you want to make. It can be really difficult to, you know, if you go into a career in business or a career in law or a career in nursing or whatever it is, a lot of these professions, they have a really direct path to success. You know, you just follow the steps, you get the job, you get your pension and your weekly checks, and then you're good. And maybe you get a raise, maybe you don't, maybe you move companies, fine, but you have ways to do it. And with the arts, there's no guidance really, other than like maybe go to a networking meeting, just not helpful most of the time. And so it's really easy to feel really lost. And as someone who is supposed to be an adult, but can't really figure out how to support themselves in the way that they support themselves, it's really easy to feel kind of stunted and like you're super, super stuck and like you're still a kid. And so Bobby is in this place where she doesn't like what she's doing, but she doesn't know how to do the thing that she does want. Secretly, she knows some of the steps that she should be taking, but she's not doing those because if she did, she would have to put real effort into it and face, you know, possible rejection and all of these things. And it's just kind of complicated. And when you're in that place, it's really easy to let things, excuses, people sabotage any motivation that you might have because you have fears about moving forward with it. And so Barkley, who's the dog, is kind of representative of the way that people, you can let people influence you in certain ways when you are scared of moving forward. And so if you have someone who's maybe not good for you in your life, you might double down on that relationship or that experience or do things you might not normally do to avoid the things that you know that you should be doing because you're scared of them. And so it ends up being about, you know, toxic relationships and addiction and self-sabotage and creativity and all of these kind of interplaying things in a way that it takes a lot of willpower as a creative person to not let outside influences stop you from doing what you want to do.
Sure. And I guess there's that, and then like you're saying, there's also the fact that you purposely put those things in front of you to stop
Mm-hmm.
yourself doing them.
Yeah.
Which is very much the dynamic with Barkley and
Mm-hmm.
Bobby as well, isn't it? So this is the first book that you've written and drawn. What was it about this particular story that made you want to do that? And did you find it hard, or did you just kind of launch into it?
Yeah, I mean, I did find it difficult. I have written things, smaller things. I've written some like short stories for Gem and the Holograms. I've written some mini comics for myself. Um, but this is definitely the longest thing I've ever made, and it started out as it was supposed to just be practice for writing stories. Um, and I wasn't even sure if I was gonna, you know, make a big book out of it or whatever. It was supposed to be about 20 pages. I'd been drawing Shadow of the Batgirl for DC for a long time, and then simultaneously, Everyone is Tulip. And I just wanted to go back to basics a little bit, write my own story, work traditionally again, and it ballooned from 20 pages to 94 pages very quickly because I I realized that it was a very personal story about, kind of my experiences struggling to find my way after college and some of the people in my life. Um, and I couldn't say all that in 20 pages. And I really wanted to develop these characters and make them feel true to life. And I feel like with comics, if you can make a short comic really successful and really connect with someone, you're like a god, because it is so hard to say something not even necessarily profound. I don't know that anything that I'm saying is profound, but saying something real in a short amount of time without letting people know who your characters are and like developing them in a way that feels naturalistic. And I wanted to show people who these characters were without just saying it and letting it come through in their actions. And I really felt like I needed the space to do that. And also the other thing that I really respond to in a lot of work, and the reason I like, the work of Mariko and Julian Tamaki and some of the other indie cartoonists like that, is I like atmosphere and I like space and I like things to feel drawn out. I am not an action comics person. I think a lot of people are bored by that type of storytelling, and I just eat it up. I love it. That's the other thing that is very manga influenced, is like, give me shots of power lines and rocks on the ground and weeds and some beer bottles or whatever. I love the periphery, the outside, and I think you just can't do that in a really short amount of time. And I wanted to be able to express that type of storytelling. So it just ended up being longer and longer and longer. And even after I write a full script because I need to know where I'm going, but even after I had written the script, I went back and added scenes and added drawings and different things to kind of build up more of that atmosphere and also more of the creepiness, because I think the first round of it didn't have quite as much ominous, foreboding imagery throughout the front end of the book.
So you say you write a full script. When you work with other writers, is that how you like to work as well? Especially Dave is obviously the writer you've worked with the most. Does he give you full scripts, or do you work in a different way together?
Yeah, with David is very specific because we've developed our working relationship for 8 years, something like that. So it started out kind of more like we'd pick an idea and then he would go and write it, and it's a full script, but it's not panel by panel descriptions really. It's kind of like this is where they are, and then some dialogue with panel breakdowns. But as we have kind of progressed, now when we make things, Dave and I spend months, if not years, sometimes talking about story and characters and developing what we want the themes to be before we even put anything to paper. He still writes me full scripts. He absolutely is writing these books, but they are ideas that we've worked on for a long time. And again, he doesn't really do like panel by panel descriptions, just, scene setting and some dialogue. And then I'm working on a new book with a writer that is even looser than that. It's scene setting and dialogue, but without panel breakdowns. Like there's some page breakdowns, but actually the book that I'm working on right now, it went from like 160 pages in the script to it's now 240 based on my panel breakdowns and adding things. And we had a lot of discussion about adding some scenes. And so I really like having input into the story and the ability to kind of make my own decisions. I don't love, like, I do like having the structure. So if you gave me like pure Marvel style, here's an outline, go draw it, I couldn't do that. I don't think. I need to know, because I think the reason I
I'm
need
sure you could.
specificity is I need to know what people are saying so that I can do the acting. I find acting to be really important in storytelling, and I want to know what's in every bubble. Even if it changes, it's fine, but I want to know what's in the bubbles so that I can get the expressions just right. And so I like having it really kind of figured out before I go in.
How did you find the first time you started working with a writer that wasn't Dave, especially someone that you know well and that you've worked with over a long period of time? Was it then strange to work with other writers in different ways, or do you enjoy that process of changing it up?
I do enjoy it. I haven't actually worked with that many other people except myself. So it's basically Dave, Sarah Kuhn, and the new one, which is unannounced. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but it's very cool. So you'll find out later.
Okay.
But with Sarah, it was very easy. She writes beautiful full scripts, and I knew exactly what I needed to do and how to do it. And we had an email thread while I was working on that, and she was very open to my ideas and easy to communicate with. And she actually lives in LA, so that helped a lot. We were able to have FaceTime together and understand what we wanted. Like with Dave, there's half of the script is shorthand specifically for me. I just know what it means. He says, do that thing you do, and then I do it, so it's a little bit more detailed when you work with someone that you're not used to working with, obviously, because you can't read each other's minds in the same way that Dave and I kind of do.
Were you nervous about working with a different writer?
I wasn't really nervous, I think, just because, like I said, I'm that gold star kid. So give me an assignment and I'll do it, especially if it's very clear. And Sarah's scripts are very clear, and she's funny. She tells me what she wants. And then, so with Shadow the Batgirl, there's a little bit less of that kind of influence that I have had on some of the other books, because it's just a little bit more closely, this is the scene, and then go ahead and do it. And I'm pretty good at just checking those boxes, and that's not to say I don't have influence on it and that there isn't storytelling in the drawings. Of course there is, but I don't often get a lot of pushback on the things that I do. Like, I sent in thumbnails and I sent in all of these things, and so far everybody's been pretty happy with what I make. Occasionally there's changes. In Forest Hills, there was a couple major changes but it was like, change this page, not change the whole book, or I don't like this character, or whatever, and so I wouldn't say I'm great at criticism. I used to have a lot of problems with it in college, but I'm fairly receptive to, hey, this needs to be tweaked, whatever. And I don't, especially for something for a company like DC, I'm not going to have as much personal investment or get as offended if they don't like the way that I'm doing it, because when you're working for a megacorp, like that just kind of is what it is, and it's not like we own those characters or own that property or anything like that. So when I do retain ownership and it's my story, I'm going to have a lot more to say about how it should be told.
Sure. So what can you tell us about what you're working on at the moment?
Well, I'm working on 2 books. One of them is The Secret Project, which I can't say much except that it is with a very cool writer, and I'm very excited. And I'm kind of in the beginning stages of that. I've just finished the thumbnails and I'm about to start doing pencils on it. The other one is a new book with Dave, which will be for Dark Horse. TBD for release date, because I'm doing 2 books. But it is called Pumpkinheads, and it is about a bunch of kids who live in a punk flophouse in LA and play in a horror punk band wearing jack-o'-lantern masks while they play, hence the punk in heads. It's a pun. And it's, I think it is the best thing I've ever drawn, which is very exciting. And it also is heavily sounds a little my idea. Dave obviously has so much input, but like this comes from something that I thought was funny. I was like, what if we made a story about punk kids who wore pumpkin masks? And then from there was able to like brainstorm so much of the kind of tone and theme and things that happened in the book. And then Dave and I spent like a year talking about it and throwing ideas back and forth. And I think he did 4-5 drafts of the script where he would he wrote it all, and then it just wasn't working. And what we do is after he writes a script, we sit down together and we read the entire script together and act it out. He reads the scene direction, I read the characters, and I perform them. And there were just things that were not working, and so we had to go back and change things. We took out entire chapters, we took out entire characters, we moved things around, and so I think it is the book that is the most fully formed. I think it's my best drawings I've ever done in a book. I'm very excited about it, but I do have to start drawing this other book semi full time right now, so it is going to slow down significantly, which is too bad. I'm almost halfway done with the inks, but it still needs. It just is I think also because I'm really trying to go for it with this book. The drawings are taking me a really long time, and I haven't even started to think about color.
I'm very excited about both those. They sound great. So, and what is in your comics future? What ambitions you have? What if you could do anything? What would you like to do? Any more writing, or are there any particular characters you'd
Yeah,
like to work on? Or
I mean, currently finishing this book are top on my list, but I would very much like to do some more writing. It's hard for me because I have so much other work, drawing work to do to practice my writing. But I have some ideas. I have some backlogged things. I might try and do some smaller projects. But I would like to write more for myself and put out some more books, because it's really satisfying. It's wonderful to put out a book and have it received well when you make something with someone. It's definitely a joint effort, and you put so much love and time into these things. But I will say it is a slightly different feeling when you have made it 100% completely yourself. And I think there's some American individualism, which is not necessarily positive, that comes with that, or is where that comes from. But it does feel different, and it does feel really nice to, get a positive review for something that comes solely from you. And especially since I am not a super experienced writer, I've written some stuff, but this is definitely the longest thing I've ever written. And so to have people say positive things about the book and about the writing, and that's a really kind of a new experience for me. And so I would like to flex those muscles a little more and try and get even better at that.
Cool. And finally, if you could recommend one comic that everyone should go out and read, what would it be?
I feel like I'm a broken record with it. There's so many incredible books. Um, but Skim was really life changing for me. And um, it just is a really beautifully drawn book that feels very lived in and very real, and grapples with some themes that are not softened. You know, it has its hard edges, and I really appreciate that about it. And that's Mariko and Jillian Tamaki. It's one of my favorite books. In fact, I should go back and read it. But there are so many incredible creators now making wonderful work, and um, I just got Limbo, or In Limbo by Deb Lee, and I've read, I don't know, 100 pages of it, and it's already so good. And uh, there's a book that's only in Korean and French right now, I think. Oh no, it has maybe Italian also, called Le Ciel qui Conquiert. I am going to say that wrong. I'm trying to remember what the title is, by Yudori. And I read that in French with a little bit of help from my Google Translate. Um, and it is so incredible and so good. And if you have any access to any of the at least 3 languages that it's in right now, you find the actual title of it, because I would like people to read that. Le Ciel pour Conquête is what it's called. And I picked up a bunch of books when I was in France, and there's so many incredible books out there, but that one I had been waiting for, and it's not in English here, so I was very excited to get it, and it really lived up to the expectations.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Nicole. It was great to speak to you, and
Yeah,
yeah, really looking forward to keep pushing out the book and getting it out to readers.
yeah, I can't wait until people can read it.
Cool, great. Good to see you. I'll see you later.
Yeah, you too. It's
Bye.
been a
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.